पृथिवी शान्तिरन्तरिक्षगं शान्तिर्द्यौ शान्तिर्दिशः शान्तिरवान्तर दिशा शान्तिरग्निः शान्तिर्वायुः शान्तिरादित्यः शान्तिः चन्द्रमा शान्तिर्नक्षत्राणि शान्तिरापः शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिर्वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्गौ शान्तिरजा शान्तिरश्वः शान्तिः पुरुषः शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिर्ब्राह्मणः शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः शान्तिर्मे astu shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the plants, in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, Sarvas Sarvatra Nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So we begin today with chapter 6. It's well known as Jnana Yoga. As we know, every chapter in the Gita is called a yoga, and every chapter has a different name. So today we begin chapter 6, which is called Dhyana Yoga, the yoga of meditation. In some editions, for instance, in this book that we follow, the Sridhara's commentary, it is also called here as Adhyatma Yoga, yoga of the self, but both are related. One thing, as you probably already know, Krishna did not give his teaching dividing into 18 different chapters. He just gave his teaching. So at some later stage, the teachings that Krishna gave got sectioned into these 18 chapters, and these names were given later on. So there isn't too much controversy about why this chapter is named in one book in one way and in another book in another way. That's just for convenience of study. So let's begin with the verse number 1. Let's chant together. Anashritav karma phalam karyam karma karoti yaha sasannyasi cha yogi cha na niragnir na chakriyaha. The Blessed Lord said, "He who does the prescribed work without caring for its fruit is a sannyasi, as also a yogi, and not he who is without the sacred fire and without action." One theme that the Gita comes to again and again, and in some ways that's the central dilemma in spiritual life, is the relationship between our dealings with the world and our dealings with whatever truth there is beyond the world. In Vedanta, we see that ultimate being, that ultimate truth is just one, oneness. Everything has come from that one. On the other hand, the world that we encounter, the world in which we move and work, is filled with multiplicity, diversity. And the two seem to be in two opposite directions. On one side is this oneness of all. On the other side is this multiplicity of this world. And we are right in the middle. In the world, that's what we encounter all through our conscious period, when you are awake. That's the similar kind of world we encounter in dream. And so much of our life's experiences are associated with this multiplicity of the world. On the other hand, we are told again and again that God is infinite and God alone exists. So at some stage, at some level, the reality of God is infinitely superior to the reality of this world. Compared to God's reality, this world that we encounter is only a shadow. Now, this way of looking and understanding raises lots of questions and lots of confusion as well. For instance, if this is just a shadow, then why should I be investing too much of my time and energy into a shadow? On the other hand, if God is all that exists, why don't I see the only thing that exists? Why do I keep on seeing only the shadow? So on one hand, it makes sense then to try to make all effort to go to that one. And of course, we know it's not easy. For one thing, that one or that divine being, for many of us, that's only an idea, a pretty vague idea. And therefore, a lot of people just think, just a matter of faith, you just believe in it because, well, we have never seen it. We just have to believe in it because that's what the books say. On the other hand, this world which is considered a shadow compared to the reality of God doesn't appear so much as a shadow, it appears very real. You just hit against this table and the pain is very real. It doesn't appear like a shadow at all, it's very real. So that's the dilemma, that which is a shadow or less real appears very real, and that which we are told is the only reality is only an idea. A second thing that we notice is that we don't seem to have much choice in life as regarding working and not working, considering that life itself involves activity and movement. There are lots of things going on within us and outside of us over which we have no control. Even some of the involuntary actions, the digestive system, food is just getting digested. My heart and lungs keep on doing their work, and which is good. But I don't will it, it just happens. So there is work going on without my knowledge most of the time. And there is work that we do with knowledge as well. Now, work here, as it is used in these texts, does not mean simply physical work. It means any movement, any activity. And therefore, thinking is a work also. Mental jogging, some people like to call it. So, thinking is a mental activity. So, none of us can stay without work anytime. Even physically to sit without movement is not possible. We just kind of shake a little bit after a while. The body will make us move a little bit. But even if somebody can sit motionless for some length of time, it's not easy at all to keep the mind motionless. So work or activity seems inbuilt into our physical and mental makeup. And we know that the more we work, the more we are immersed in the chain reaction that the work sets up. And we are all familiar with that chain reaction. You do work, and of course, none of us works without a motive. For any conscious activity that we undertake, there is always some reason why we are doing it. And so we do it with some intention, hoping to get some results. Either we get the results or we don't get it. If we get the results we wanted, we are happy. If we don't get the results that we want, we are unhappy. And so joy and sorrow become a part of our existence. This joy and sorrow then prods us to do some more work because we have more needs. We have more things that we feel will bring us fulfillment, because right now we feel unfulfilled. And so the greater the work that we do, some amount of fulfillment comes, but also an equal amount of unfulfillment, because there is never an end to how much we want. And so all of this drags us into this multiplicity and apparently far away from that calm, all-pervading oneness. So that's the dilemma. So what to do with this work? And it would seem, as I said, natural for those who want to seek that oneness is to then say, let me not get involved into this work and the world and its multiplicity. Let me just now immerse myself into that one. And which is what these first two verses, although this chapter is Jnana Yoga, the yoga of meditation, and really it is a yoga which will, we would imagine, want us to focus on that one, really begins by praising work in the first two verses. The reason it is done is that in our great desire to leave aside all this and then go to God alone, we must first of all, if we are honest to ourselves, we find it's not possible. A certain amount of preparation is necessary for us to be able to turn towards that oneness. And that preparation involves work. So it is, we can reach that oneness not through avoiding work, but through work. It is through work that we reach the state of worklessness. So, as I mentioned on earlier occasions, work is like a key. We know that the key that locks a door is also the key that unlocks it. It just depends on which way you turn it. And so the solution is not to stop working, but to work in a way which, instead of increasing my bondage, instead of increasing my stress and anxiety, will in fact decrease it. The work can become an agent of freedom. And that is what karma yoga means. So karma means work. Karma done the way most people are doing, which produces a lot of pain and suffering, is a disease, karma roga. But karma done properly, the way we have seen in the first 5 chapters, karma done as a yoga, then that becomes a key which will lead to freedom. And that is why we see Krishna says in this first verse, he who does the prescribed work without caring for its fruit is a sannyasi, as also a yogi. Now, a sannyasi, by definition, is one who has given up, one who has renounced, one who has, just let go of everything. So how can one who is doing work be considered a sannyasi and a yogi? And the reason is this. The word sannyasi here is used in the sense of giving up. And if I do my work without hankering after the results that it produces, then I have given up my desire for the results of the work. So if the older idea of a monk or a sannyasi was one who gives up society and goes into the forest, goes to the Himalayas, or goes to a desert, or goes on to mountaintop, and then just sits and meditates. What Krishna is pointing out here is, it's not such people alone who are sannyasis. In fact, if someone simply goes to the forest and does nothing, just not doing anything doesn't make one a sannyasi. Because it's possible to just go on a mountaintop, apparently having renounced all this busyness of the world, and sit there and just be consumed, just be thinking about the world all the time, but physically sitting on a mountaintop. That's not a sannyasi. On the other hand, it's possible to be right in the middle of a busy city and yet not be attached to anything, to have given up all work. So a person can continue to work and not be greedy for the results of the work. And that is what Krishna says. When such a person, now prescribed work, that's an important adjective really. There are in traditional texts, they say there are 4 kinds of work. If you want to make it more and more complicated, you can invent more and more categories. So the 4 kinds of work in Sanskrit are called Nitya, Naimittika, Prayaschitta, Nitya, Naimittika, Kamya, and Nishiddha. So Nitya, though that work which we have to do regularly in ritualistic terms, based on one's stage in life, there are certain things we have to do regularly. Then Naimittika means there are certain kinds of work which are done on special occasions. Kamya means the work which is done out of a desire for something. And Prayaschitta means a karma that is done, a work that is done to neutralize certain effects. So this is how traditionally it is done. So the work here, prescribed work, means that work which we are supposed to do. So if you do the work that you are supposed to do without seeking its results in a detached way, then you are a sannyasi. Now we might say, what about the work which is done with desire? Well, that's by definition. You cannot do without desire that a work that is supposed to be done with desire. For instance, in the Vedas, there are certain rituals. They say, if you want to go to heaven, do this ritual. Or if you want rain, do this ritual. There are rituals for every kind of desire that we are capable of having. And so if you have this desire, do this. Now we might say, well, can I do this? Can I do the same thing without desire? And the answer is, well, why do it? Because it's not saying you must do it. It's just saying if you have a desire for this, then you do it. So that doesn't mean that you have to do it. But there are certain things we have to do. As I said, for instance, now to give one example would be, and this is I'm not sure how many people do it today, but in the Vedic times there was a kind of a fire worship. It's called Agnihotra. So certain people had to do it daily. Now many of those rituals may have gone out of fashion and today, but there are certain things we have to do. For instance, as a student, while I'm a student, my duty is to study. That's a prescribed work. That's not a question of I don't have desire to work. Well, if I don't have a desire to work, then I shouldn't desire to study, then I shouldn't call myself a student. So if I'm a student, then studying is a prescribed work for a student. If I'm a teacher, teaching is a prescribed work for it. If I'm a physician, then physician has his or her prescribed work. So today we can understand what prescribed work means in terms of the different duties that come to us at different stages in life. So doing that work without caring for its fruit doesn't mean doing the work haphazardly. It's like, well, I don't care for its fruit, so let me just get it done, get it over with. That's not the idea. Krishna says you must do the work with as meticulously as possible. That is why he said, yoga karmasu kaushalam, doing work with great attention, with great care. And having done that, you just step back and say, now the results can take care of themselves. Now, as I have said before, if you don't care for the results, doesn't mean that it won't happen. It's like you go and take good care of your garden. You work hard, with great love, with great dedication, you do everything in a garden. Now you say, well, I'm not caring for the results, doesn't mean that the beautiful flowers won't come. Of course they will come. But if for some reason, say, you have worked very hard grooming and preparing stuff in the garden, and next day there is a heavy storm and everything is ruined. Now, either you can be so depressed, so angry, so upset that I worked so many hours and it's all ruined, or you can say, I worked, that the joy of working that I got, that's mine. And maybe it was just not meant to be. And this is just one example. Exactly in the same way, everything that we do in life, no matter where and in what situation and what context, we can do it with all love, all care, all attention. And then the results, whatever they are going to be, are going to be. You really don't have too much control after that. As Swami Vivekananda used to say, ours is to put the chemicals together. Crystallization will take up on its own. So that's what the attitude is. And if we are able to work with that attitude, then results will come. But if they don't come, you will still be able to hold your balance. Such a person, he says, is a sannyasi. And how is such a person a yogi? Because only when I am able to work without attachment, I am able to work with in the way without hankering, without greed, then my mind becomes calm. And when my mind is calm, then I am a yogi. Because that's by definition. Yoga, as you can remember from the Patanjali's aphorism, yogas chitta vritti nirodha. One way of understanding yoga is it's stilling of the waves in the mind. Now, the commotion in the mind will come to a standstill only when there are no desires, only when there are no sense of unfulfillment. So, if I am able to work with detachment, it produces calmness in my heart, and that is why I am also a yogi. So, the same person can be both a sannyasi and a yogi if such a person can do all their work without attachment. That's the idea. Verse 2. Yam sannyāsamiti prahuhu yogam tam vidhi pandava naihya sannyasta sankalpo yogi bhavati kaschana. Know that which is extolled as sannyasa to be yoga, O Pandava. Verily, no one becomes a yogi without renouncing desire for the fruit of action. If you remember the what would I say? The image I had presented to you some time back of what does desire do? And just to kind of refresh your memory, if you can visualize a big kind of a pot, a big container about half filled with water and it's being heated. So after a while, the water is going to get warm, and after some time it's going to start boiling. And when it starts boiling, then it is about to start, after some time you will see tiny bubbles at the bottom of that container will start coming up. And as they come up, they'll become larger and larger and then burst. Now hold that image in your mind. Now imagine that container to be your mind. And that portion which is filled with water is the mental basement. And the second half, which is not filled with water, that's the conscious mind. And at the bottom of that container are the seeds or impressions, mental impressions, called in Sanskrit samskara. Now, it is these mental impressions which are in the mental basement, in the unconscious part of the mind, which like tiny bubbles come up. And as long as they are in the unconscious part of the mind, you don't even know they are there. Well, that's unconscious part of the mind. So we become aware of it only when it comes up on the surface and then bursts. Then we suddenly become aware, oh, I want, sometimes you feel like, I would like to have a cup of coffee. Now, before you become aware of that desire for the cup of coffee, your coffee samskara had already begun its journey from your mental basement and it started coming up. And only when it burst on the conscious this thing, you become aware of that desire. So it is this desire, until that coffee impression came up as desire, you are very calm, you are in bliss. And then that desire comes up and says, oh, I need coffee. And then immediately your whole calmness is disturbed by that desire. So that's what really desires do. It takes, coffee is a pretty harmless desire and maybe even good, taken within limits. But that's not the only desire we have. There are a whole bunch. Our mental basement is filled with infinite impressions. From where do these impressions come? All the thoughts that we have thought, all the actions that we have committed, not only in this life but throughout existence, in all our past lives. Every action leaves an impression, and they are all there in the basement, infinite number of them. And any one of these impressions can come up as a desire. So there is potentially infinite number of desires such as waiting. That is what is put here then. Now if you look back and see, no one becomes a yogi without renouncing desire for the fruit of action, because every time the desire comes up, then my mental stillness is disturbed. And so I will need to not hold on to those desires. And that's what renouncing the desire really means. And just to refresh your memory still more, no one can really stop the desires. Sometimes we say, oh, I need to get rid of my desires. I don't think it's, as long as the mental impressions are there, desires are going to be there. So you really cannot stop the desires. What you can stop is transforming the desires into intention. That's all that you can stop. So when it is renouncing a desire, that doesn't mean for instance, now you have a lot of coffee samskaras, coffee impressions. Every impression is capable of producing a desire for coffee. So there is this impression, it needs some trigger. For instance, you're passing by Starbucks or Dunkin' Donut, and you kind of get that aroma of coffee. But that external trigger can trigger that coffee impression in your mind, and then a desire comes, oh, I would like to have a coffee. Now you can't stop it because the impression is already there. You can't pluck it out, and the desire will come. Now, what you can stop is, when that desire comes, your freedom lies in saying whether or not to say yes or no. So if the desire for coffee comes, you can either say yes. You go and grab hold of the desire and say, I will go and drink a cup of coffee. So now your desire is transformed into intention. That is, desire is sometimes called vasana. Now vasana becomes sankalpa. Intention means sankalpa. So when it becomes an intention, when my will go and grab that desire, it becomes an intention. Once it becomes an intention, then the next step is action. Then I start walking towards the Starbucks, go there and get myself a latte or a coffee or whatever else you want. So what we can do, renouncing desire really means not allowing the desire to be made into an intention. That is where our freedom lies. Does it make sense? So although you might hear a lot of times the books kind of simplify it and say, oh, give up the desire. But psychologically, desire really is there in your basement. It's already there and it's going to come up. What you can do, one more thing you can do, is if you are a problem with your coffee desire and you know that any trigger can set that, anything outside can trigger, then you can say, what are the triggers for my coffee desire? And you might feel, well, every time I pass by a Starbucks or this thing, I feel like, oh, let me go in and have a cup of coffee. And so one other thing that you can do is try to take a route on which there are no Starbucks. I mean, as far as possible to kind of prevent the triggers, external triggers. We see that in Swami Adbhutananda, Latu Maharaj. He was one of the great disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. Now, he was actually born in a shepherd family from a very poor family in Bihar, and then he moved at a young age to Bengal. Now, in the kind of the surroundings in which he had grown up, it's almost like a slum area. Drinking was very common. All the people, alcoholics, not just drinking, people who are really addicted to drinking. And so many of his childhood memories were associated with just seeing people, just addicts. And so afterwards, when he grew up, he came in touch with Ramakrishna and then started meditating. He discovered that every time he would go somewhere on the street, and if there is a pub or somewhere where they are selling alcohol, just the sight of that would trigger the childhood memories when he saw all those addicts, and that kind of disturbed him. And so Sri Ramakrishna says that he was so particular about his spiritual practice that if he had to go somewhere and he found that on that road there are some pubs or something that might trigger those memories, he would avoid that road altogether. Now, that is something that we can do. So there are two things we can do. First thing is actually a more preventative thing. If there are certain desires in our heart we want to get rid of, then what we must try to locate is what are the triggers. When do these desires come in my heart? And if it is something that I feel is not good for me, that if it is weakening me in one way or the other, then let me try to keep away from those triggers as much as possible. Now, it may not always be possible, but you can at least make an effort. Now, in spite of your efforts, there is some trigger still produces that desire in the heart. Your next line of defense is don't allow that desire to become an intention. Because once it becomes an intention, then there is really nothing much you can do, because then it's going to be transformed into action and you're going to do what you really didn't want to do. So that is what Krishna is pointing out here, that no one becomes a yogi without renouncing desire for the fruit of action. And so I have now tried to explain to you what renouncing desire means. Two things. First, keeping away from the triggers, and second, not allowing the desire to become an intention. If we can do that, then that is the way to become a yogi. And therefore, that which is praised as sannyasa is same as yoga, because sannyasa means giving up. And to be a yogi, we have to give up the fruits of action. We have to give up desire. And you know what I mean now when I say give up desire. Any questions for these two verses that we have seen so far? Alexi, could you get this thing? Here. Third row.
Swamiji, how does one, I guess it was not clear, how do you prevent a desire from becoming an intention?
Well, as I said, if you want to reduce the amount of coffee that you are drinking every day, then a desire comes up and says, oh, I would like to have a cup of coffee. And then you have to just use your willpower and say no. That's the only way. No shortcuts. One other thing you could do, one is, of course, this is the direct way, just say no. Second thing would be, try to think of something else. Because, you see, this is an important thing. It's very interesting also. At any given time, at any given moment, the mind can hold only one thought. even when you think that, oh, there is lots of ideas going on my mind, we might think that simultaneously my mind is thinking a lot. Actually, it's not. At any given moment, the mind can hold on to only one thought. When we think that there are many thoughts, essentially, the mind is just jumping between this. So, and it does it so fast, we think that all those thoughts are in the mind at the same time, but really it's only one. So if you're thinking about, say, coffee, you want the mind, the thought of coffee has been in your mind for, say, 2 minutes. It's really not just, it's like every moment, coffee, it's just going on. Now, if you can now puncture that and then introduce something else, so actually distracting yourself is also a good idea. And that's why sometimes say, for instance, the one remedy for anger, it is, sometimes when someone is irritating you, or someone is like, oh, I'm just getting irritated now. This person just makes me upset. So the trigger. A certain person could be a trigger for you to get irritated. And well, as long as the trigger is there, maybe your will may not be strong enough to keep on saying no. So one way would be to leave the room. Go out, maybe go out and take a walk, or pick up a newspaper and read something, or switch on a television. The idea is, if I can now give something else my mind to feed on, then hopefully that thing which was disturbing me will go away. Now, that's not a permanent solution. That's only a quick fix, because you have not really eliminated. So for instance, we just keep on to that example of the coffee. Now, if the coffee desire comes up and I say no to it, I have not eliminated that impression. It's just that it comes up and it just goes back again and just sits in the basement again. But at least I have solved the problem for the time being. So that's what we do. Yeah. Anything else? Anish? Yeah.
So Swamiji, I just have a question about the explanation for desire and overcoming desire, but it says renouncing the desire for the fruits of actions. And so it's the second part which is confusing to me. I understand what you explained about severing desire from intention, but then what does it mean when it says the fruit of action?
Yeah, every desire. For instance, now, every work, we say that there is a saying, prayojanam anuddishya na mandopi pravartate in Sanskrit, meaning that even a stupid person doesn't do without a motive. So everything that we do in life has a motive. So when we undertake some work, there is something we expect to achieve through that work, which is fine. Otherwise, we wouldn't have begun the work at all. Giving up the desire for the fruits means that you focus on the work itself. You want there is a certain motive, you want certain result, and you determine that in order to get that result, I need to do this work. So that connection has already been made. This work, and that's the effect. Having made that connection, now you do the work and get all the joy you can by just doing the work well. After having done the work, the result should normally come, except that if my doing the work properly were the only factor involved, then I would be the only one responsible for the result of yes or no. But there are factors in any work that we do in life. There are factors involved over which we don't have control. So we can only take responsibility for that which we have control over. And the example I gave you about gardening, the control you have is, I can go and work hard in the garden. I will do the best I can. You don't have control over weather. You don't have control whether next day there's going to be a storm or what. So if you have desire for the results, fruit, then there is a chance that a storm may destroy your desire, and then you're going to be miserable. If you're going to be miserable, it's not just like, oh, I'm miserable and then it's gone. No, that misery then leaves another impression. In that state of miserableness, whatever work I do that gets ruined also. So it's kind of it's a domino effect. On the other hand, if I say, I want this, I want to have a beautiful garden, and I work hard. And well, of course, I'll be happy if the desire occurs. But if it doesn't happen, then I can say, well, it was not meant to be. And that's true with everything in life. We will see that there are times when we may work very hard, try to do everything perfectly, and yet it doesn't happen. And there are some times when you may not work so hard, and things happen very perfectly, showing that our effort is not the only factor involved. There are other factors over which we really don't have too much control. You and then you. First you.
Swamiji, I think I remember Osho once saying that if you pursue, I guess, manifest your desire so much, after a point it'll just become, you'll become detached from it. So let's say you like to play video games. If you just let a child play video games like 3 days in a row, eventually they'll just be fed up and they'll give it up and they'll move away. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if you can, the samskaras that arise, if you just continuously just manifest them, can they just get burnt away after a while?
No, fortunately not. It's like this. For instance now, if I had only one, just theoretically assuming that I have not had a single coffee samskara in me, okay? And then someone introduces me to coffee. And so I drink my first cup of coffee and I love it. And so now I have a coffee impression. And it's a very pleasant impression. That impression is associated with joy because I enjoyed coffee. So next time that impression will produce a desire for coffee. And because I've enjoyed it, I say yes. And then I drink another cup of coffee. Now that doesn't eliminate that first impression. But because I have taken coffee again, now instead of one impression, I have 2 impressions of coffee. Now because I have 2 impressions of coffee, the possibility of those impressions getting triggered and manifesting already becomes double. So if we have an intense desire for something, it means I have a lot of seeds of that particular desire. So people who are like addicted to coffee may have millions of coffee impressions in the heart. So the idea that you keep on doing something until you get exhausted, it's not that you will not get exhausted. Well, after some time, it's after the body after all. The body does get tired. But the body gets replenished also. Next day, I can drink, say, 10 cups of coffee. And I say, I'm exhausted. I don't feel like drinking any more cup of coffee. Okay, then I go and have a good night's sleep. Next day, I'm fresh again, and I'm ready for another cup of coffee. So yes, you can get exhausted, but that exhaustion is not permanent. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, just a minute.
So the thing with some of the impressions of desire, you said some of them are so deep in our subconscious from past lives or very early experiences. So it seems like we always have to be alert. Some aren't as obvious as coffee and just avoiding Starbucks. So it just seems like that cycle is never going to end. You never know when a desire is going to spring up, or you can't always have such a proactive plan for dealing with it.
Well, you actually answered the question yourself. You have to be alert. And you see, in life also, when we are alert, we make fewer mistakes. When we are alert, we usually do the right thing. The only time we do stupid things are for momentary, that alertness loses. And so there has to be continuous vigilance. Yep. So that's the answer. Yeah. And I think we can begin by being alert for small snatches of time. If we have not practiced it it's not like right away, it may not be possible for us to be alert all 24 hours, although that's the goal. If we can be alert all 24 hours, then we have already become yogis. We have become enlightened. You see, yogis are alert even in their sleep. That's why yogis can control their dreams. The alertness can be extended into our unconscious mind. You see, when the water starts boiling, when the bubble at the bottom of the container is very tiny, By the time it comes up, it's already become bigger. Now, it's so much easier to control that desire if you kind of nip it in the bud. Now, when yogi has developed that alertness which extends into the unconscious, so a yogi is able to know his or her desires even before they come on the conscious plane and just nips it in the bud. The problem with us is, although in that example I just said about half of the container is filled with water, now imagine 98% of the container is filled with water and just 2% is empty. In other words, 98% of our mind is unconscious. Just we are aware, we have awareness of only 2% of what's going on within us. So when these desires come, when we become aware of the desires, it's already traveled 98% of the journey. It's already become strong, and therefore you really need a strong willpower. You really need to say strong no to that. So in the beginning, therefore, why don't we say, let me practice alertness for 5 minutes. Can I just do what I'm doing for 5 minutes with total alertness? And that alertness can begin with just being alert about what's happening around me. Just being still. Am I alert about the sounds that are occurring? Am I when I'm sitting on the chair, does my alertness tell me about the pressure that the chair is exerting on me? Being alert about the sights in front of me, and so on. So begin with small. And I think the best time for those of us who practice prayer and meditation, I think the best exercise we can have every day is during my prayer, during my japa, during my meditation, can I be alert? And most of the people have difficulty saying, why am I not able to concentrate my mind in meditation? Now, why does my mind wander? Now, that wandering occurs because of lack of alertness. And so, practice of prayer and meditation would mean that let me practice that next 5 minutes or 10 minutes, I'm going to pray or meditate with total alertness. Being alert to one idea or one object or one form or one sound automatically means keeping everything out of the field of consciousness, that I'm not aware of anything else because I'm aware of only this. That would be a way to train the mind. And once we can train the mind that way, then we can extend it. Then it's not just at the time of prayer or meditation. When you're at your workplace and you're undertaking something, do it with alertness. In fact, most auto accidents take place because that momentary lack of alertness that occurs. So even we need alertness when you're driving, especially in a very busy traffic. Alertness is important. So alertness is important everywhere, and more so in spiritual life. So we have to go step by step, and that's the way to do it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, right.
Swamiji, what I understand that desireless is not bad. What we are desiring for, it's
Sure.
so desire will be there. But if we are desiring for spiritual life or path, so that desire is good. And of course, in the beginning, we will have waiting for the fruit that I'm going the right direction. So is it okay to have that kind of desire?
Of course, yeah, you're right. So desire, although I said saying no, doesn't mean that every desire we have to say no. I think the desires which are good are not so much a problem. No one comes and complains like, oh, I have too much desire to meditate. Well, that's not a problem, so we don't have to say no to it. Of course, we have to say yes to it. The desires which we want to stop, the desires which we find weaken us, either physically, mentally, morally, those are the desires which are a problem. And to those desires, we need to say no. And it's a good point that you actually raised, because one other way to deal with these desires where we need to say no is to then consciously say yes. Okay, let me put it this way. If the certain we know, okay, let me rephrase what I'm saying. I said that those desires, if we know the desires that we want to avoid and we know their triggers, then we must, first thing we can do is try to avoid those triggers, stay away from them. Now, if there are certain desires, and there will be, there are also some strong, positive, healthy impressions in our minds, which produce good desires. A desire to go and help people, a desire to study, a desire to read holy books, a desire to meditate. Now, those desires also need triggers because they are also mental impressions, and which is why then if we can keep, and one of the reasons we have many spiritual seekers have a small shrine of their own. Now, a shrine can be a trigger. Every time you look at your shrine, it triggers the desire, let me read about it, let me meditate, let me pray. So, we can consciously use the triggers which produce healthy desires and consciously keep away from triggers which produce unhealthy desires. That's the idea. It's what, remember, you might remember a story Sri Ramakrishna used to say that there was this if say to give a, I'm not giving the exact example that Sri Ramakrishna gave, but he said, suppose the doctor has told you not to eat sour and pungent things, but you love them. Now, every time you see a pickle and you love pickle, automatically, you see, sometimes you don't even have to eat pickle, just a sight of it, sight of some delicious food, the body will already start releasing the juices. So that's what a trigger means. So now, if you have it around you and a doctor has said you shouldn't eat it, then you are consciously putting yourself in a situation where your willpower has to do a lot of overtime. So it's so much more easier than at least physically keeping that stuff away, so that it's again not a foolproof solution, but at least a way in which the triggers will become less and less. So, and all of us, when we are all adults, we are not little children, so we know from our own life's experiences which tendencies of our mind make us better, stronger, healthier human beings, and which tendencies of our mind make us weaker or make us forget our ideal or make us kind of lose sight of the goal. We are aware of it. And so all that we need to find is which are the triggers which make me do the right thing and which are the triggers which make me do the wrong thing. Consciously poke at these healthy triggers and consciously keep away from the unhealthy triggers. It's as simple as that. But there's a lot of homework really involved there. And homework is not with books, it's just studying one's own mind and seeing what needs to be done and what should not be done. And one who does it well, this kind of an internal examination, and if we are able to eliminate from our lives even one weakness per month or per year, even then we will find a very tangible improvement in our lives, a tangible transformation. But if we don't do this homework, if we just kind of go with the flow, then years may pass. We might be deluding ourselves into thinking, oh, I'm very spiritual, I'm wonderful, it's happening, and maybe it might be a big shock then that after a long time you might find, well, nothing much has changed. I'm the same person I am before. That wouldn't be a very nice thing, because if we are sincere spiritual seekers, we are investing our time and energy into it, and we want to see results. And the results will come if the practice is conscious, if we try to remain alert. And one final thought before I leave you. Sometimes we might think that, oh, this being alert always and then keeping these triggers out and holding on this trigger, it's just going to take all fun out of life. It's just going to, it's a lot of work. Believe me, in the beginning it might seem a bit cumbersome, just looking at what desires and what should be done, what shouldn't be done. But it's not really as complicated as it sounds. And if you do even a little bit of it, you will find life becomes even more enjoyable than it's now. You will experience much less pain, much less heartache. Just the simplifying one's life brings in all the joy that we want. And so some of these things appear more complicated in telling, but when you actually start practicing it, you will find it's not really that complicated. Spiritual life, most of the time, is just basic common sense. We really don't need to study or read a lot of books. Just apply common sense, and we will see that it's not complicated. So we will stop here today. These first two verses are a way that connect us to what we have seen in the earlier chapter. We saw there about work and doing work in a detached way. What these two verses point out is that before we enter into the study of meditation, we need to know that our mind must become pure through detached action, of a mind which has been trained, which is alert, which knows which triggers to allow and which triggers to keep away from. Only such a mind becomes ready for meditation, is fit for meditation. Not simply if I say, oh, I'm just straight away going to a forest or a desert, away from all people, away from all sound, and I'm just going to sit and meditate, may not help much, because the sound, the disturbance is not coming from the road, is not coming from people. All the sound and the disturbance is in the mind. And if that mind is not taken care of, I may go into the loneliest part of the planet, I will still hear all the sounds there. I will still hear all the disturbance there. And in order for the mind to be taken care of, that can be taken care of right here, right where we are. And if we take care of the mind well, then we become ready for meditation. And that's what the thing that the rest of the chapter then will teach us. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother again and again. So we'll continue with this next Wednesday, same time, same place. We'll conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the great spirit of the Native Americans and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the all-living being become manifest unto us. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May the Divine bless us all and fill our hearts with infinite grace and love. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.